Hello, and welcome to the Climate Conscious Podcast, a podcast for people who care about environmental sustainability and climate action. I'm your host, Deval Bazi. Today's special guest is a lawyer, social anthropologist, and an avid traveler who believes in the power of tourism to positively impact people and planet. To pursue her goal to work in the sustainable travel space, she completed the University of Pennsylvania's Executive Program in Social Impact Strategy. She is the creator of Eco Island Travel, a social enterprise to inspire, empower, and connect travelers to new experiences and adventures that also positively impact the planet and people. She is a certified tourism ambassador. She's also a good travels advisor and has completed a certificate in sustainable tourism with the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. I am delighted to welcome to the Climate Conscious podcast Ms. Marcelle Lawrence. Hello and welcome, Marcelle.
Hello, Jarval. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be on here and to share about what I'm so passionate about and to speak about sustainable travel and what I do. So thanks so much.
So, Marcelle, as an avid traveler and as someone, as we like to say, who's accustomed to catching flights and not feelings, how are you coping with our new reality of lockdowns, quarantine, and closed borders?
Yeah, it's been a challenge because I am very used to traveling at least once a year overseas. And as you might or might not know, Bermuda is like 21 square miles. So we're a pretty small country, and to travel abroad is quite normal. So it's been a challenge. But what I have been doing is I've been venturing at home, as small as we are. I am still venturing outside and spending a lot of time in nature and the outdoors and doing different things. So that has kind of alleviated the part about not being able to travel. So I've been enjoying Bermuda, staycationing and just trying to do as much as possible to keep myself occupied.
Yes, I think a lot of us are really either discovering or reconnecting with our local treasures.
That's right, and have a new appreciation for our own countries, right?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Traveling domestically has its benefits. It gives you the opportunity to rediscover your own country, but there's, I think, nothing like traveling overseas and experiencing different cultures and a different environment. It's just something about that experience that is so transforming. But in the meantime, I'll take domestic travel.
yeah. Domestic travel over no travel, right?
Exactly.
And I was fortunate that I did my last trip just before the whole meltdown with the COVID-19 pandemic. I had the good fortune of visiting India and I spent a month there. And it was so amazing to experience their culture, their foods, their heritage. You are never the same after having that sort of experience. It stays with you, it stretches you.
Yes.
Travel is really a transformative experience, and it's not just about going to Miami and shopping. To me,
Hmm.
travel is about experiencing a different culture, a different way of life, and
No, absolutely.
recognizing that
I couldn't
although
agree more. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I couldn't agree more. There's just something about travel. It's an experience that you really can't compare it to anything else. And like, because as a tourist, you go to have a nice time, but as a traveler, you go to change your life, so to speak. And it's all about going with an open mind, you know, trying to learn about the culture, mingling with locals, and just trying to have an immersive experience as much as possible. And when you go with that sort of those sort of intentions, it's really life changing.
Indeed. And you mentioned the distinction between being a tourist and being a traveler. You are the creative Eco Island Traveler.
That's right. Yeah.
So how did this originate?
So ironically enough, it stems from my experience, which happened over 20 years ago. So I'm kind of showing my age. But over 20 years ago, I had an experience where I went to volunteer in Guyana. I was in university at the time, and this opportunity came up. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. It just was something new, and I've always been that type of person who tries new things. So here I was, um, just a young person, and there I was going off to Guyana, and I was there for 4 months, and I was working with disadvantaged children, but the travel part came in, whereas I I was able to venture out and explore and really connect with locals, and it was just a life-changing experience. So ever since then, as long ago as it was, it stayed with me. And now I've had the opportunity to sort of like bring this whole experience and vision to life with Eco Island Travel. I've always been an outdoorsy person anyway. I've always loved being in nature and connecting with the outdoors. So those two experiences came together with Eco Island Travel. And the other thing about Eco Island Travel is the social impact part is that I'm really keen to um, include and expose young Bermudians, or young disadvantaged Bermudians, I should say, to marine tourism and the marine ecosystem or marine environment. Um, I am very keen to do this because I want everyone to be, well, I think everyone should be included in Bermuda's future, in Bermuda being sustainable, and especially with the issues of climate change and so many other issues that we have in the environment, that we need diverse voices involved. We need to hear from everybody regarding how they feel about the environment. And the best way to do this is to get people connected and involved in their environment. So people who wouldn't normally be involved in environmentalism, I'm looking to really empower this group of young Bermudians. So I'm excited about that as part of Eco Island Travel.
So your experience 20 years ago in volunteering in Guyana, would you say that was your introduction to conscious travel?
Yeah, I was doing something, I guess, that I wasn't even aware of, that was even called conscious travel. Conscious travel, sustainable travel, responsible travel. It has a few names to it,
Mm-hmm.
but it really comes down to the way that we travel, really. And so, it's all about supporting locals, empowering locals, minimizing any negative impacts that we have on the environment, like our carbon footprint, being really supportive of the local culture in a way that preserves the culture. So there's just some examples of like what conscious travel involves. And as I said, I was very fortunate, whereas when I was in Guyana, I had the opportunity to really have an immersive experience with the local people. I learned so much about their culture, their cuisine, um, history. It was just a fabulous experience. And like I said, I didn't know it was called conscious travel back then.
Yeah. And as you said, there are a couple of names for it: conscious, sustainable, impact. I
Yes.
came across a quote that conscious travel is about human rights and sustaining communities, not
Mhm.
just about environmentalism.
Mhm. I do like that definition.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's, when we talk about sustainability, the first thing that may come to people's mind is the environment, but it's not just about the environment because it has to involve communities and it has to involve the people in the environment. So, it encompasses so much more. And it's really, I think, really come to the forefront maybe in the last few years how important um, local communities are when we talk about sustainability. So yeah, I like that definition.
You mentioned that one of your aims is to use travel to empower young disenfranchised people. Can you elaborate on how you are achieving this aim?
So we're starting out, and one of the initiatives that we have done is just a simple beach cleanup, inviting young people to become involved in initiatives like this, whereas they're getting exposure to the natural environment and their eyes are being open to what the challenges are, what some of the issues are. Because if you do a beach cleanup, this within itself opens your eyes up to some of the issues that we're having in the environment. The amount of marine debris and plastics that's found on beaches. And I think this is everywhere now. You can't go anywhere without finding plastic. Um, it really gives them a good idea or some really good insight as to what's impacting their environment and how they can help and how they can get involved and how it's meaningful to them. So that's one of the initiatives. um, and going forward, we will be using eco-friendly activities to involve young people. um, and during our tours we hope to empower and involve young people on our tours, and eventually, um, because our tours will be marine based, and so eventually they're going to have a really good idea of the marine environment, and hopefully want to really engage with protecting the marine environment and just the natural environment in general.
So, Marcelle, how can I become a conscious traveler?
Well, with being a conscious traveler, um, it's really a change in our habits because we've been doing things that have become so habitual over the years that it's just being more mindful, and it doesn't happen overnight because of the habitual way that we've lived for so long. So for example, one simple step is to, so this is the first step that I started with, is to reduce your use of plastic plastic water bottles. Get yourself a reusable bottle. I think that it's a really easy and simple way to reduce your environmental footprint with plastics. So me and my reusable water bottle, we are just like inseparable. And I just find that it can be really impactful as well. What I should really say is, start where you are, because right now we're not really traveling in the way that we're accustomed to. So start where you are, which is probably at home. So just take small steps wherever you are at home right now in the country that you're in. And then when you are ready to travel, these are just habits that will become like second nature to you. So, reduce your single use plastics, avoid takeouts. Um, and then when you do travel, it's just like you're more aware of these sorts of things, especially in countries where they don't have good waste management. So you're thinking, well, I need to cut down on my plastic, and it helps when you go overseas. So those are just some ways. And of course, when you're at home, buy local, support local. And then when you travel, you're going to be in the same mindset where you're looking for, how can I support locals wherever I am? How can I empower them? So those are just a few ways of becoming a more conscious or sustainable travel. To start right where you are.
Yes, and I think that's a common theme whenever we talk about sustainability, because essentially you're changing a habit and
Mhm.
it takes time. So I
Yes.
always like to emphasize progress over perfection. and the
Exactly.
power of making small, consistent changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just about making a start and like you said, being consistent. And it's not going to be perfected overnight because these are habits that we have to change. So, don't be hard on yourself, and
Yeah.
just and just start somewhere.
Yeah, and from doing this podcast, you recognize that sustainability has a role to play in everything that we do.
Absolutely.
It's about applying those principles across the board. And I
That's right.
particularly like the emphasis on the social impact, the people, especially I think when we may probably visit a resort, an all inclusive resort, and we are kind of cut off from the realities of the local environment.
Yeah, I mean, inclusives, they're great if you want to go as a tourist.
Right.
You don't have to leave the resort. Everything is there for you. Um, but because I think we can gain quite a bit from when we travel, but we can, as long as we're giving as well and finding ways of how we can give and empower, then I think that from that experience of giving and empowering the local communities with all-inclusive resorts, they're great for some people, but it kind of defeats the purpose of travel. And that's just my opinion, because I think that travel, the whole, you just miss out on the whole experience of what travel can do. So me myself, when I travel, I would avoid an all-inclusive, or, if I have no other option, I would venture out and make sure that I'm supporting the locals, the people who need it more, people who need the
Yeah.
travel dollars more. So that's just me.
Yeah, it really requires a level of mindfulness that I'm traveling to
Hmm.
this location, this destination. I want to relax or I want to experience something new, but I also would like to have a positive impact. I don't think it's the norm to think about it that way. But
Hmm.
definitely going forward when things reopen, I hope that we make a conscious effort to become conscious travelers and not just tourists.
Hmm. And I
So
think now is it's an opportune time because we're not traveling. So if we could be more mindful now, I think that when we do start to travel, we can be so much more impactful. So I think this is a great time for people to start thinking about being more mindful.
So some may be under the impression that, sustainable travel means sacrificing luxury and modern comforts. Is that the case?
I think that that sort of travel, sustainable travel, I think that it's adjustable. It suits all types of travelers, luxury, budget. You can be sustainable whichever way that you're looking to travel. I know with some luxury brands, especially maybe with like an eco lodge that offers luxury accommodation. Um, that's one way within itself, staying within an eco lodge that is a luxury based. And then you have some hotels that are luxury based that have a great corporate social responsibility um, program, whereas they are um, empowering the community and supporting local initiatives. So, I mean, there's just so many ways to be impactful and make a difference when you travel. It just depends on how you want to do it. With the more immersive experience, I guess, things like homestays, they tend to be on the more budget side. But if you're traveling to a country, just homestays, staying with locals, really getting into the community with volunteering. And when volunteering is done right, it can be very impactful. And that means really finding out the needs of the community and what they need, opposed to just getting to a destination and say, this is what I want to do. It can be kind of counterproductive. But if you volunteer right, that means that you are supporting what the locals need and you are getting input from the locals. Um, so back to your question, can sustainable travel be done on a luxury based or, budget. Yeah, there's so many ways that sustainable travel can be implemented.
So, Marcel, the global pandemic has more or less crippled the region's tourism industry. And for many Caribbean islands, this is the main source of revenue. But as we look forward to recovery and the eventual opening up of our borders and the reintroduction of tourists, what role do you think that conscious travel or sustainable tourism can play in supporting the region's sustainable development?
Mhm. So yeah, you are absolutely right. Islands are very dependent on tourism, and our borders were shut for like 3.5 months, and we saw the impacts of what that did to our tourism industry and our economy. So we have opened up to tourists. Um, anyone can come here to Bermuda and travel to Bermuda right now. We have very stringent testing protocols in place. Um, but I think that I'm hoping that, it changes travel in the way that it becomes more sustainable. I mean, right now, people are traveling more domestically and taking more staycations. Um, and I'm hoping that when travel does resume, that, people would want to stay longer in destinations rather than taking, a trip here or there just for a couple of days, but longer travel, because that's what's happening now. So if that trend stays, that will definitely lead to a more sustainable way. Because when you travel less, of course, you are reducing your carbon footprint. And if you're staying longer in the destinations, then you're having more of an impact in the destination, positive impact, because you would be supporting the local economy. And with no cruise ships at the moment, with cruise ships and island travel, this is always a contentious point, because on the one hand, cruise ships, they do bring in a lot of visitors, and a lot of people are dependent on cruise ships for their livelihoods, whether directly or indirectly. But on the other hand, cruise ships have been known to be, terrible for the environment, and they also have been known to not not really help the economy that much either, because cruise ships visitors, they don't spend that much.
The money goes back, right?
Yes, it gets back. They don't come off the ship, um, because all their meals they get on the ship. So we all know with cruise ships that the passengers really don't support the local economy that much. And so when travel returns, what is that going to look like? Are we going to have cruise ships return, and are we going to have them return in the numbers that we had them? That in some destinations that was, leading to severe over tourism, where you had thousands and thousands of people just descending onto a destination all at once and leading to so much overcrowding. So, you know, I'm just hoping that we really take time to reflect on how we're going to restart tourism and what that's going to look like, even here in Bermuda. What's that going to look like? Are we going to still try to encourage um, airline passengers to come, who tend to stay longer? So there's just some ideas.
Well,
Mm.
here in Trinidad and Tobago, our borders remain closed and they have been closed since March. And
Mm.
although Trinidad is the more industrialized of the two islands, Tobago's economy is heavily based on tourism. So we are feeling the
Mhm.
effects of this closure. Even with our internal restrictions, it has limited the amount of domestic tourism.
Mm.
So it really is a difficult situation.
Mhm.
But like you said, when we open back up, I'm really hoping that there can be some emphasis on more sustainable forms of tourism, although I fear
Yes.
it will be pretty much more of the same.
Mhm. I mean, it's a great time now to have those conversations where destinations are starting to talk about, well, what's it gonna really look like when we reopen? But what I'm finding is that it's tending not to take place. Like there's conversations are not taking place. Destinations seem to be much more focused on just restarting tourism because of the impact that it's had, of not having any tourism. Destinations are just really anxious to just restart it. So there's conversations are not really taking place, and this is a really great time for that to happen. But I understand, but I just still feel that this conversation should be taking place as well.
Yeah. The COVID-19 pandemic is just one threat to our region's tourism industry. Climate change is another big factor that has been affecting our coastal low-lying areas. And both man-made
Mhm.
infrastructure and natural ecosystems like our beaches and our reefs are being impacted by climate change, more so sea level rise.
Most definitely. Sea level rise and stronger storms and hurricanes. So with the hurricane season, we've had 3 hurricanes so far, and they haven't been that strong. They've been category 1, category 2, but the sort of damage and erosion they've done to the coast has just been extraordinary. And they weren't even direct hit hurricanes, but they just did so much damage to our coastlines. So we are seeing that, and it's just so important. Well, I think just islands have a really unique place when it comes to talking about climate change, because I think we're often the ones to feel the effects first, because we're just surrounded by the ocean. So we see the sea level rising. We feel the impacts of stronger hurricanes. So I know what some destinations are trying to do is make sure that mangroves are being replanted, because mangroves have a huge part to play in climate change. They are a tree that absorbs, like I call it the super tree, because they absorb so much carbon. I think out of all the plants and trees on earth, like mangroves store and hold so much carbon. And a lot of islands are trying to restore their coral reefs, because of course the coral reefs, they tend to, what's the word, they sort of tend to prevent, or stop the strong waves from coming in.
Yeah.
And also yeah, and also seagrass beds. A lot of islands are looking at trying to regenerate these seagrass beds, because they also have a part to play with sea level rise and the impacts of hurricanes. And there was a lady, Angela Burnett Pan from British Virgin Islands, who she said a quote, and if you don't mind, I can quote her. She said, "It's never more important than ever that we protect our natural defenses. If we protect them, they'll protect us." And what she was referring to is our mangroves, our coral reefs, and our seabeds. She's written a whole book about how these 3 natural assets, if we just invest in them, how they can protect us from the effects of climate change. So it's really important. And like I said, we're Trinidad's an island. I'm sure you see the effects as well.
Yes.
So we're quite vulnerable. Hmm.
Yeah, the thing about it
Yeah.
is that the very thing that makes us such an attractive destination is also what makes us highly vulnerable in terms of climate change.
Yeah, exactly. So fitting that into travel, when people travel to islands, it's not to sort of like shove it down their throat, but to just give people a better understanding of what some of the challenges islands are facing, and how they can help, or how they can contribute to, just helping islands manage better with these effects, because there's so many conservation efforts going on right now in probably every island. In Bermuda alone, there's so many. And so just really getting travelers, tourists up close to some of these issues and some of these conservation organizations, I think, would just give travelers a better idea of their impact as well when they come to travelers. I mean, when they come to islands, and how, they can be more aware of these issues and how they can help. So it's just really important. And like I said, it's not to like sort of bombard people. So it's just all about education.
Yes, I think it's important that we make the connection when visitors come to our islands, make the connection between what they do back in their countries and the effect that it has on us as small islands.
Yeah, so making that connection is, it's key. And like I said, it's just about education and just raising the awareness, and not to, like you said, shame people or travel shame people, because that's counterproductive, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, people don't travel to islands to necessarily see dead or dying corals, or or other things that have damaged the natural assets. So it's just so key that, if we can just take care of the environment and try to regenerate it as much as possible, so that islands who are dependent on tourism can continue to benefit from tourism. Because without these natural assets being around, um, there's going to be no tourists. And it's also so important, um, to preserve these assets, and to, like you said, make the connection. Um, so there's a lot of work to be done, but that connection is so important.
Yes, definitely.
It's all about the sustainability of islands. So for one, we depend on tourism, so we have to make sure that we are maintaining what we have, so tourists can continue to come. It's about the sustainability of islands for locals. We have to make sure that we're able to continue to live on islands as well. So it's it's about the education right now.
Awareness is a first step, and my
Mhm.
hope is that awareness would lead to meaningful action.
Yeah, because you don't want to have awareness without actionable steps for people to take. But there has to be a start, because the later we start, the less that's going to be done. But if we can make a start now, and people could make just actionable steps, put them in practice, then there is some hope. And we do have time. I know scientists have said that we have until 2050, or now I'm hearing 2030, to reverse the effects of climate change. So there is some time for people to start. And we talk about the people, but it's the corporations as well. It's definitely the
Definitely.
companies and the corporations that have to get on board.
Yeah. So we have acknowledged that tourism plays a big role in our region's economy. What would you say is the dark side of tourism?
So we touched on, the all inclusives, which, it doesn't really benefit the local destination as much, because a lot of those inclusive resorts are not locally owned. They may employ locals, but because they're not locally owned, a lot of the money goes out of the economy, and by the way of leakage. So the destination is really missing out on those tourism dollars. Another thing that comes to mind is, when we talk about tourism and the negative effects, I mean, pollution just comes to mind, right? Because if you have thousands of people visiting all at the same time, and you have a country that has really poor waste management, then you will have pollution, and it's not going to be managed properly. And so the pollution is going to get into the natural environment, it's going to get into the ocean. So I'm not sure why some of these countries are not as prepared when it comes to waste management, but they just don't have the capability or the infrastructure. Um, Over tourism, we touched on that a bit as well. When we talk about over tourism, we're referring to large crowds of people visiting the destination all at the same time. So we're talking about crowding. It's not nice for the locals, and I'm sure tourists don't really enjoy it as well. Um, so, you know, for tourists, they're missing out on enjoying their travel because of the large crowds. And so they're not able to really have a really authentic experience of the destination. Um, we talked about cruise ships, touched on that a bit. It's like I said, it's a contentious point, but so many locals do depend on tourism visitors and the spending. So it can go both ways. Cruise ships are terrible for the environment, but so many people are dependent on them. So that's just some of the things when we talk about the negative impacts of tourism, Deval.
No, it's not all negative. There are many positives, many benefits that we derive from tourism.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many positive things about it. That's why I love tourism so much, because of the profound impact that it can have. Um, One of the things that I really appreciate about tourism is that it can really touch the lives of underserved and disenfranchised groups of people and help to improve their livelihoods. For example, I mean, in some of the emerging countries around the world, like Africa, it's helped to empower and just give more opportunities to people in those regions. And, their quality of life has improved and their livelihoods have improved. So that's one of the things that I love about tourism. Um, and also, it helps to preserve culture as well. When done properly, tourism can really enhance a country's culture because it encourages destinations or local communities to really invest and promote their culture and try to preserve it. And another good thing about tourism is the cultural exchange. I mean, we talked about it earlier when we go to different countries, and that whole exchange that we have with other people and learning a different culture. I mean, it's just invaluable, and it's like it's like no other experience. So
Indeed.
this are some of the benefits. I could go on and on, but um, those are the ones that really stand out to me.
Yes.
There is a movement that is taking place. So with conscious and sustainable travel, it's going to destinations and traveling and leaving the destination the same. So there is a movement called regenerative tourism. And what that means is that when people travel, they're leaving the destination better than how they found it. So there is a slight distinction. So with regenerative tourism, it includes sustainable tourism, but it's just taking it a step further, where it's participate in initiatives that leave the destination better. So, for example, it could be travelers who participate in a mangrove planting initiative, right? So they're practicing sustainability on the trip, but they're also contributing to leaving the destination more improved, better than how they found it. So this initiative is really it is, like I said, one step further than sustainability, and the intentions are for tourists to get really involved in some of these initiatives. So from what I can see, this seems to be the way to go, and it's catching on.
Where can listeners connect with you, Marcelle?
Okay, so I am on Instagram, Eco Island Traveler, and I also have a website. It's called Eco Island Travel. So you can connect with me on either one of those sites, and we can continue the conversation of sustainable travel.
Thank you for sharing the power of travel and tourism to inspire, empower, and connect.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. It's always a pleasure. I always enjoy talking about, how we can travel better and be more intentional and mindful when we travel. So I've enjoyed our talk today. I hope that your listeners have been inspired and can take away some actionable steps or tips from our conversation. And when we get back to, I guess, some sort of normalcy, that we can all become more sustainable and conscious travelers.
Experience Altitude Adjustment, a weekly podcast about people, politics, and professions. It's built around user interaction, so join the conversation by visiting the Lions Den, stl.wixsite.com/home.